He received a call from the hospital. "Your baby is born." After seeing the baby's picture, he refused to accept him. He never visited his wife or son, sending divorce papers to the hospital instead, leaving them shattered. But 3 years later, his wife's revenge was unmatchable, leaving him to face the pain he once caused. Hello, my beloved story readers. Welcome to Mr. Peter's Stories. Today, my heart is heavy and my soul aches for the people of Los Angeles. Witnessing their unimaginable pain and loss has brought tears to my eyes. So many have lost everything: homes, cherished memories, and the sense of security they once held dear. I too am grieving the loss of a close friend, and words cannot express the depth of my sorrow. My heart breaks for the families, the children, and the shattered communities left to pick up the pieces. I pray with all my being that they find solace in each other, strength in their faith, and a glimmer of hope for a brighter tomorrow. May the Lord wrap them in his love and guide them through this darkness. Amen. Now let us begin this story with a heart weighed down by grief. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Maison de Blanc, Boston's most exclusive bridal boutique, casting ethereal shadows across the imported marble floors. Astria Blackwood stood before the three-panel mirror, her heart beating in perfect synchronization with the gentle sway of her wedding dress. The gown, a masterpiece of French craftsmanship, featured thousands of hand-sewn silver threads that caught every ray of light, creating an almost celestial effect against the ivory silk. At 32, Astria had long since abandoned the fairy tale dreams of her youth. Her life had been dedicated to the ruthless pursuit of excellence, graduating summa cum laude from Harvard Medical School, completing her PhD in molecular biology by 28, and pioneering research that promised to revolutionize cancer treatment. Love, marriage, and the traditional trappings of happiness had seemed like distant luxuries sacrificed on the altar of scientific advancement. Until Dominic Thorne walked into her laboratory 6 months ago. She closed her eyes, remembering that first encounter. He had come to review her research for possible hospital funding, his reputation preceding him like a herald's trumpet. At 38, Dominic was already a legendary neurosurgeon, his name whispered in reverent tones throughout the halls of Massachusetts General Hospital. His papers on innovative surgical techniques had earned him international acclaim, and his steel-grey eyes had graced the covers of medical journals and society pages alike. "The dress is exquisite, Doctor." "Blackwood," came the soft voice of Madame Rousseau, the boutique's owner, interrupting Astria's reverie. "It captures your essence perfectly, brilliant, elegant, and just a touch ethereal." Astria smiled at her reflection, running her fingers over the intricate beadwork at her waist. The dress was indeed perfect, but it wasn't just the masterful construction or the way it hugged her curves. It was what it represented: a new beginning, a chance at having it all. She remembered the skepticism in her colleague Dr. Elena Martinez's voice when she announced her engagement after just 4 months of dating. "Astria, you're a scientist. Since when do you make life-altering decisions based on emotions rather than data?" But what Elena and others didn't understand was that falling in love with Dominic had been as natural as understanding a complex chemical reaction. Their minds worked in perfect synchronization, finishing each other's sentences during medical discussions, building on each other's theories until simple conversations became groundbreaking medical hypotheses. Their first date had lasted 6 hours, beginning with coffee at a small cafe near the hospital and ending with them sketching potential surgical innovations on napkins long after the staff had begun cleaning up around them. By the third date, they were co-authoring a paper on the integration of her cancer research with his surgical techniques. By the second month, they had developed a shared language of inside jokes and meaningful glances that made everyone else in the room feel like outsiders. The proposal had come during a midnight walk through the hospital's rooftop garden after they had both finished grueling shifts. Dominic had taken her hands in his, those surgeon's hands that could perform the most delicate of procedures, and spoke words that would change her life forever. "Astria," he had said, his voice carrying the same intensity he brought to the operating room. "I've spent my entire life believing that excellence in medicine was the only path to fulfillment. But you've shown me that true brilliance isn't just about individual achievement. It's about finding someone who elevates your work, your thoughts, your very existence, to heights you never imagined possible." He had dropped to one knee then, pulling out a ring that perfectly married their personalities, a platinum band holding not a traditional diamond, but a rare blue alexandrite that changed colors under different lighting conditions, just as their relationship transformed and deepened with each passing day. Now, standing in the boutique, Astria touched the ring on her finger, watching it shift from deep blue to purple in the fading sunlight. In less than 24 hours, she would become Mrs. Dominic Thorne, though she would keep her professional name, Blackwood, for her research work. The wedding would be small but elegant, 100 of Boston's most prominent medical professionals gathering at the historic Mount Auburn Chapel, followed by a reception at the Harvard Club. "Shall we try the veil now?" Madame Rousseau asked, holding up a gossamer creation that seemed to float in the air. Astria nodded, standing perfectly still as the older woman carefully arranged the delicate fabric. The veil, like the dress, had been custom-made, featuring the same silver threading that would catch the light as she walked down the aisle. As it settled around her shoulders, Astria felt a sudden rush of emotion she hadn't expected. This wasn't just about love or marriage or even the merging of two brilliant minds. This was about allowing herself to be more than just Dr. Blackwood, the researcher. It was about embracing the possibility that one could be both scientifically brilliant and deeply, irrevocably in love. Her phone buzzed softly from her purse, and Madame Rousseau retrieved it for her. A text from Dominic lit up the screen. "Just finished a successful temporal lobe resection. Thinking of you. Can't wait for tomorrow." Astria's heart swelled as she typed back a quick response. This was what made their love special, the ability to share in each other's triumphs, to understand the weight and significance of their work, while still maintaining the tender connection that had brought them together. The boutique's antique clock chimed 6, its melodious tones echoing through the space. Outside, Boston's medical district was coming alive with the evening shift change, doctors and nurses streaming in and out of the numerous hospitals and research facilities that made up this part of the city. Somewhere in that organized chaos, Dominic would be finishing his post-operation notes, perhaps already thinking about their honeymoon plans. 2 weeks in Santorini, where they would split their time between exploring ancient ruins and attending a prestigious medical conference. "Your mother would have been so proud," Madame Rousseau said softly, adjusting the veil one final time. The comment caught Astria off guard. Few people knew about her mother doctor, Isabella Blackwood, a pioneering female surgeon who had died of the very disease Astria now worked to cure. It had been her mother's battle with cancer that had driven Astria into research, seeking answers in laboratory test tubes and genetic sequences. "She would have loved him," Astria replied, her voice thick with emotion. They would have talked for hours about surgical techniques and medical ethics. The thought of her mother brought back memories of childhood conversations about balance, how to be both a brilliant doctor and a complete human being. Isabella had managed it beautifully, never missing a school play or science fair despite her demanding schedule. She had taught Astria that love wasn't a distraction from greatness. It was the foundation upon which greatness could be built. As the final fitting drew to a close, Astria took one last look in the mirror. The woman who gazed back at her was both familiar and strange, still the dedicated researcher, but now softer somehow, glowing with an inner light that no scientific instrument could measure. Tomorrow, she would walk down the aisle toward a future that promised everything she had ever wanted: intellectual partnership, emotional fulfillment, and the chance to make a real difference in the world of medicine. What she couldn't see in that moment, as she stood surrounded by silk and silver threads, was how quickly dreams could unravel, how the very qualities that made love sublime, trust, vulnerability, hope, could also make its betrayal devastating. She couldn't know that the man she loved, the brilliant surgeon with steel-grey eyes and a smile that could melt winter, would soon reveal a capacity for cruelty that would shake her faith not just in love, but in the very foundations of human decency. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, in the gentle embrace of evening light and bridal silk, Astria Blackwood allowed herself to believe in the perfection of the moment, in the promise of forever, and in the power of love to transform two brilliant individuals into something even greater than the sum of their parts. As she carefully changed back into her work clothes, her mind already turning to the experiments waiting for her in the lab, Astria felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. She was no longer just the dedicated researcher, the brilliant scientist. She was a woman on the verge of having everything she had ever dreamed of, standing at the threshold of a future bright with promise. The silver threads of her wedding dress caught the last rays of sunlight as Madame Rousseau carefully packed it away, each sparkle a promise of the joy to come. Tomorrow would begin the next chapter of her life, a chapter she believed would be filled with love, discovery, and the kind of happiness that came from finding one's perfect match in both heart and mind. If only she had known then that every thread of that beautiful dress, every moment of pure joy and anticipation, would soon become a reminder of the most exquisite betrayal. A betrayal that would transform her from a woman in love into an architect of the most elegant revenge. Chapter 2. The First Crack. The Santorini sun had long since set behind the pristine white buildings of Oya, but its warmth still lingered in the air and in Astria's heart. 3 months into their marriage, she sat on the balcony of their luxury suite, the Aegean Sea stretching endlessly before her like a canvas of possibilities. The medical conference that had brought them here had ended 2 days ago, leaving them with precious time to simply be together, away from the demanding pace of Boston's medical community. The pregnancy test sat in her lap, its 2 pink lines as bold as the horizon before her. 3 tests, all positive, all taken in the pristine marble bathroom of their suite while Dominic was at his morning swim. She hadn't planned this, hadn't even thought it possible given their rigorous schedules and her age, but here it was, life, defying all careful planning and professional timing. Astria's hand drifted to her still flat stomach, her mind already racing with calculations and possibilities. At 32, she was considered of advanced maternal age in medical terms, a fact that both amused and irritated her, given her own medical background. She knew the statistics, the risks, the probability matrices that would now govern her next 9 months. As a researcher, she had spent years studying cellular division and growth. Now those same processes were happening within her own body. The sound of the suite's door opening pulled her from her reverie. Dominic entered, his hair still damp from swimming, wearing the casual linen outfit that made him look more like a Greek god than a neurosurgeon. For a moment, she simply watched him, remembering their wedding day just 3 months ago, how perfect everything had seemed. "The water was incredible," he said, crossing the room to kiss her. "You should have joined me." Astria caught his hand, her heart racing. This was the moment she had been rehearsing in her mind for the past hour. How to tell him, what words to use, how to share this unexpected miracle with the man who had promised to share every triumph and challenge with her. Dominic, she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I need to show you something. She handed him the test, watching his face carefully. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across his features. Surprise, certainly, but also something else. Something that didn't quite align with the joy she had anticipated. His steel-grey eyes, usually so warm when they looked at her, seemed to cloud over. You're pregnant? His voice was carefully neutral, the tone he used when delivering complicated news to patients' families. Yes, she replied, her own excitement faltering slightly at his measured response. I took 3 tests, all positive. Dominic set the test down on the ornate side table, his surgeon's hands unusually stiff. He paced to the balcony's edge, staring out at the darkening sea. The silence stretched between them like a widening crack in pristine marble. We should wait, he finally said, still not looking at her. Your research is at a critical phase. The timing isn't ideal. The words hit Astria like a splash of cold water. She stood, her legs slightly unsteady. Wait? Dominic, I'm 32. We both know the statistics about maternal age and fertility. This might be our best chance. He turned then, his face composed into the mask he wore in the operating room. Professional, detached, logical. Exactly. You're at the peak of your career. The cancer research you're developing could save millions of lives. A pregnancy now would mean stepping back from the lab work, dealing with restrictions on handling certain compounds. It's not just about us anymore. Think of all the people waiting for breakthroughs in your research. Astria felt the first real crack form in her perfect world. She had expected joy, excitement, maybe even a touch of anxiety. But this cold, clinical dismissal of their child's existence struck at something fundamental in her soul. My mother managed to be both a surgeon and a parent, she said, her voice gaining strength as she thought of Isabella Blackwood's legacy. In fact, it made her a better doctor. Having a child doesn't mean abandoning our work. It means having something even more precious to work for. Dominic's expression softened slightly, but his eyes remained distant. Your mother was from a different era. The demands on medical professionals now are exponentially higher. The competition for funding, the pressure to publish. You know this, Astria. You're on the verge of something revolutionary with your research. She walked to him, taking his hands in hers, trying to bridge the sudden chasm that had opened between them. This baby is revolutionary too. It's us, Dominic, our genes, our love, our future. We can make it work. We're both brilliant problem solvers. Surely we can figure out how to balance parenthood with our careers. He withdrew his hands gently but firmly, moving back into the suite. We should discuss this with your doctor when we return to Boston. There are options to consider. The word options hung in the air like poison. Astria felt her stomach turn, and for the first time she wasn't sure if it was morning sickness or the realization that her husband was suggesting something she couldn't even contemplate. There are no options to consider, she said, her voice taking on the steel that had helped her survive years of being the only woman in many of her advanced science courses. This is our child, Dominic, a perfect combination of your brilliant surgical mind and my research capabilities. Think of it as the ultimate collaboration. He didn't smile at her attempt at humor. Instead, he began methodically packing his conference materials, his movements precise and controlled. We need to think this through logically, without emotion clouding our judgment. That's what separates us from other people, Astria. Our ability to make rational decisions based on data rather than feelings. Some decisions aren't meant to be purely rational, she countered, thinking of all the times she had witnessed parents in the hospital fighting impossible odds for their children. Some choices come from a deeper place. The suite's phone rang, shattering the tension. Dominic answered it, his professional mask sliding perfectly into place. Dr. Thorne speaking. Yes, I see. Of course I can consult on the case. I'll review the files immediately. He hung up and turned to her, already reaching for his laptop. There's a complex case back in Boston. They're sending me the patient's scans. I need to focus on this now, but we'll discuss the pregnancy situation later. The pregnancy situation. Not their baby, not their child, not even their future. Just a situation to be managed, like a complicated surgical case or a funding shortfall. Astria watched as he immersed himself in work, effectively ending their conversation and leaving her alone with the weight of their child's existence. She returned to the balcony, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. The Aegean stretched before her, dark now except for the reflection of stars and the lights of fishing boats in the distance. Somewhere in the village below, a family was celebrating, their joyful Greek music floating up on the warm breeze. In that moment, as the reality of her husband's reaction settled around her like a shroud, Astria made a decision. This child was happening, with or without Dominic's enthusiasm. She would find a way to balance everything. Her research, her pregnancy, her career. She was, after all, her mother's daughter, and Isabella Blackwood had taught her that the most important experiments in life often came with unexpected variables. Later that night, as Dominic slept beside her, his face peaceful in repose, Astria lay awake, her mind racing. She thought about the cells multiplying within her, creating something entirely new. As a scientist, she understood the miracle of it, the precise genetic dance that would combine her traits with Dominic's to create a unique human being. As a woman, she felt the profound rightness of it, despite her husband's reservations. She turned away from him, curling protectively around her still flat abdomen, and whispered a promise to her unborn child. No matter what happens, you are wanted. You are loved. You are the best kind of breakthrough. The crack that had formed in her perfect world that day would soon widen into an abyss, but Astria didn't know that yet. She couldn't see how Dominic's reaction was just the first tremor in what would become a seismic shift in their lives. She didn't realize that sometimes the first crack in a foundation could bring down an entire structure. But she did know, with the certainty that had driven her through years of research and medical training, that she would protect this child with everything she had. She had spent her career fighting to save lives through science. Now, she would fight just as hard for the life growing within her. The stars continued their dance over the Aegean, indifferent to the drama unfolding in the luxury suite below. In the distance, the celebration continued, its music a bittersweet reminder that somewhere someone was finding joy in the very thing that was causing her world to shift on its axis. As she finally drifted toward sleep, Astria's last conscious thought was of her mother. Isabella had always said that the most important experiments were the ones that surprised you, the ones that forced you to question your assumptions and find new ways forward. This unexpected pregnancy was exactly that kind of experiment, and Astria was determined to see it through to its conclusion, regardless of the variables that tried to derail it. She couldn't know then that this was just the beginning, that Dominic's reaction was a harbinger of betrayals to come. But something fundamental had shifted in their relationship, like a hairline fracture in a precious crystal, invisible perhaps, but irreparable. Chapter 3. Shadows lengthen blood, life, death. Through the lens of her microscope, Astria watched cancer cells writhe and die as her experimental treatment took effect. At 5 months pregnant, her lab coat stretched tight across her growing belly, but her hands remained steady as she documented another breakthrough. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m., its soft ticking a counterpoint to the hollow silence of her marriage. The emptiness had become a physical presence in their lives, as tangible as the ultrasound images Dominic never asked to see. Tonight, like most nights now, he was supposedly performing emergency surgery at Mount Sinai in New York. The lie had been delivered with surgical precision over breakfast, each word carefully chosen to cut without leaving visible scars. "Remarkable response in sample group C," she murmured, making careful notes while her other hand unconsciously cradled her belly. The baby, their son, though Dominic seemed increasingly reluctant to acknowledge that fact, had been active tonight, as if sensing her heightened emotional state. A movement at the lab door drew her attention. Elena stood there, concern etched on her features, tablet clutched in her hands like a shield. "I found something," she said quietly. "About Dominic's New York trips." Astria's hand tightened on her pen, but her voice remained clinical, detached. "Show me." Elena approached, laying the tablet beside the microscope. On screen was a society page photo from a Manhattan charity gala dated 2 weeks ago. Dominic stood smiling beside an elegant woman in blue, his hand resting casually on her lower back. The caption identified her as Dr. Victoria Hammond, head of neurosurgery at Mount Sinai. "He claimed to be in emergency surgery that night," Astria said, her scientist's mind already cataloguing inconsistencies, building a hypothesis she didn't want to prove. "There's more." Elena's fingers moved across the screen, bringing up hotel receipts, restaurant charges, a pattern of meetings that had nothing to do with medicine. "He's been seeing her for months, since before the pregnancy." Astria completed the thought, her hand moving protectively over her belly as the baby kicked, as if sensing her distress. The cancer cells under her microscope continued their dance of death, responding to her groundbreaking treatment protocol. Another breakthrough that should have been cause for celebration, shared with the brilliant surgeon she'd married. Instead, she sat alone in her lab at midnight, watching cells die while her marriage did the same. "Dr. Blackwood?" A new voice interrupted. James Chen, one of her research assistants, practically vibrating with excitement. "The results from the longitudinal study just came in. You need to see this." Pushing back from the microscope, Astria took the offered data sheets. The numbers were extraordinary, unprecedented survival rates, tumor reduction beyond anything previously documented. In any other moment, this would have been the highlight of her career. "This could save millions," Elena breathed, momentarily distracted from the evidence of Dominic's betrayal. "If we can get it through trials," Astria agreed, her scientific mind already calculating next steps even as her heart splintered. "We'll need funding, support from the board." "The board meeting is tomorrow," Eleanor reminded her. "Dominic's Uncle Carlton chairs the research committee. He's been blocking our funding requests for months." Of course he had. The Thorne family closing ranks, protecting their surgical dynasty from what they probably saw as a distraction. Astria's breakthrough research, like her pregnancy, didn't fit their carefully constructed narrative. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if protesting the family he'd been born into. Astria smiled grimly, running calculations in her head. Pull up the hospital's surgical schedule for the past 3 months. Cross-reference it with Dominic's claimed emergency surgeries. Elena's fingers flew across her tablet. "Already did. The discrepancies." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "They're not random. There's a pattern." Astria moved to the whiteboard, where she tracked her research protocols, uncapping a marker with precise movements. "Show me everything. Times, dates, locations. We're going to analyze this like any other experiment." For the next hour, they built a timeline. Each of Dominic's absences was noted, each excuse documented with scientific precision. Patterns emerged, regular trips to specific cities, meetings that coincided with charity events, surgeries that didn't appear in official records. "He's getting sloppy," Elena observed, watching the data points multiply. "The discrepancies are becoming more obvious." "No," Astria corrected, her voice taking on the steel that had earned her department head position at 32. He's getting confident. He thinks I'm too focused on my research, too distracted by the pregnancy to notice. The whiteboard now looked like a detective's murder wall. Dates connected with lines, locations circled in red, question marks hovering over suspicious gaps. But unlike a detective's investigation, this one was being conducted with the precision of a scientific study. "Start deep background checks on everyone he's been meeting," Astria commanded, her researcher's mind fully engaged. "Focus on the women. Dr. Hammond isn't the first, I guarantee it. Look for pattern disruptions, career changes, sudden relocations." The baby kicked again, a sharp reminder of what was at stake. Astria pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the strong movements of her son. Dominic's son, though he seemed increasingly determined to deny that fact. "There's something else," Elena said hesitantly. "The Thorne Family Medical Foundation, their grant allocation patterns show some interesting anomalies. Women in prestigious positions suddenly losing funding, promising careers, stalling for no apparent reason. Pull those records too. Every grant rejection, every withdrawn funding proposal. If there's a pattern of professional retaliation." Astria's voice trailed off as another piece clicked into place. "Check hospital hiring records as well. Focus on female surgeons and researchers who had contact with Dominic during his residency rotations." The night deepened around them as they built their case, the lab's fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows. Outside, Boston's medical district hummed with the quiet energy of hospital nights. Somewhere in that complex of buildings, in a penthouse suite Astria never visited, Dr. Victoria Hammond was probably making plans with a man who had once pledged his life and love to another. "We should take this to the board," Elena suggested, but Astria shook her head. "Not yet. We're scientists. We don't present findings until we have irrefutable proof. And something tells me this experiment has more variables than we've discovered." She turned back to her microscope, where cancer cells continued their death spiral under her revolutionary treatment. Like those cells, Dominic's carefully constructed lies would eventually succumb to the right protocol. It was just a matter of finding the correct combination of evidence and timing. "Your mother would be proud," Elena said softly, watching her friend's unwavering focus. "She always said the best researchers were the ones who could separate emotion from observation." Astria smiled grimly, thinking of Isabella Blackwood's legacy, not just as a brilliant surgeon, but as a woman who had fought her way through a male-dominated field without losing her integrity. "My mother also said that the most dangerous experiments were the ones where you thought you knew all the variables." She straightened, one hand resting protectively over her belly while the other made careful notes. "Dominic thinks he's controlling this situation, managing all the variables. He's about to learn what happens when a scientist decides to change the parameters of the experiment." The shadows lengthened across her lab floor as the night deepened, but Astria's mind was clear. Like the cancer cells under her microscope, Dominic's deceptions would be systematically exposed, analyzed, and ultimately destroyed. It was just a matter of applying the right methodology. The baby kicked again, strong and insistent, as if affirming his mother's resolve. In that moment, surrounded by the tools of her research and the evidence of her husband's betrayal, Astria felt something shift inside her. The trusting wife was dying, like the cancer cells in her breakthrough treatment. What would emerge would be something far more dangerous. A brilliant mind focused on exposing truth, no matter the cost. Let the shadows lengthen. She had spent her career bringing light to dark places, exposing hidden killers at the cellular level. Now she would apply that same precision to a different kind of cancer. The metastasizing lies that threatened to destroy not just her marriage, but potentially the careers and lives of other women who had crossed Dominic's path. The experiment had begun. Chapter 4. The storm breaks. The first contraction hit Astria in the middle of analyzing breakthrough data from her latest cancer treatment trial. The pain wrapped around her lower back like a vice, causing her to grip the edge of her lab bench with white-knuckled intensity. She glanced at the clock. 2:17 p.m. Carefully, she noted the time in her phone, approaching this like any other data collection exercise. The experiment before her was at a critical stage, cancer cells responding to her revolutionary treatment protocol in ways that could change the landscape of oncology forever. But an even more important development was occurring within her own body, right on schedule at 38 weeks. "Elena," she called out, her voice steady despite the building pressure, "I need you to take over the cell culture analysis and perhaps call me an ambulance." Elena's head snapped up from her own workstation, eyes widening as she took in Astria's stance and controlled breathing. "How long have you been having contractions?" "This is the first notable one," Astria replied, her scientific mind still cataloguing every sensation. "Though in retrospect, the lower back pain I attributed to laboratory posture this morning may have been early labor." Eleanor was already moving, one hand reaching for the phone, while the other helped Astria to a chair. "I'm calling the ambulance and then Dominic." "No," Astria said sharply, then softened her tone. "Let me try him first." Her fingers shook slightly as she pulled up Dominic's number. After 5 months of documenting his absences and lies, she still held onto a sliver of hope that the birth of their child would be different. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. "Dominic," she said, her voice clinical and precise, masking the storm of emotions beneath. "I'm in labor. I'll be heading to Mass General's maternity ward. If you get this message—" She paused, another contraction building. "If you get this message, your son is coming." Elena watched her friend's face with a mixture of concern and barely contained anger. "I'm calling him myself," she declared, pulling out her own phone. Astria didn't protest this time, focusing instead on her breathing as the EMTs arrived. The hospital was only a few floors away, but protocol demanded proper transport for a high-risk pregnancy. As they wheeled her through the familiar corridors, she continued calling Dominic's number, each unanswered ring another crack in her already fractured heart. The maternity ward was a stark contrast to her sterile research lab. Warm colors and soft lighting replaced the harsh fluorescence she'd grown accustomed to. Dr. Sarah Chen, her OB-GYN, was already waiting, having been alerted by Elena. "Your blood pressure is higher than I'd like," Dr. Chen noted, reviewing the EMT's readings. "And the baby's heart rate is showing some concerning patterns. I think we should prepare for a C-section." Astria nodded, her researcher's mind already calculating risks and probability matrices. "Has anyone reached Dr. Thorne?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The silence in the room was deafening. Eleanor, who had followed the ambulance in her car, stepped forward. "I've called every hospital number I can find. No one seems to know where he is today." Another contraction ripped through Astria, stronger than the last. The fetal monitor began beeping urgently, its steady rhythm suddenly erratic. "We need to move now," Dr. Chen announced, her voice carrying the authority that reminded Astria of her own mother. "Babies showing signs of distress." Everything moved quickly after that. The operating room was prepared, consent forms were signed, and Astria found herself staring up at the harsh lights she knew so well from the other side of the surgical equation. The anesthesiologist explained the spinal block procedure, but her mind was elsewhere, still trying to understand how the man who had promised to share every moment of their lives could be absent for this most crucial one. As they prepped her for surgery, Astria thought about the evidence she and Elena had gathered over the past months. The pattern of Dominic's absences had become clear, though their meaning remained elusive. She had tracked his movements across cities, documented discrepancies in his surgical schedules, and noticed the way he would tense whenever she mentioned the baby. The spinal block took effect, and Astria felt the strange sensation of pressure without pain as Dr. Chen began the procedure. Elena stood by her head, one hand gripped tightly in hers, the other still holding a phone that remained stubbornly silent. "Scalpel," Dr. Chen called out, and Astria couldn't help but think of all the times she'd heard Dominic use that same tone in his own surgeries. Where was he now? What could possibly be more important than the birth of his son? The minutes stretched like hours as Dr. Chen worked with practiced efficiency. Astria focused on the ceiling, counting the tiles, analyzing the pattern of the ventilation system. Anything to keep her mind from the crushing weight of Dominic's absence. Then suddenly, a cry pierced the operating room. Strong, defiant, alive. "It's a boy, Doctor," Chen announced, her voice warm with joy. "A beautiful, healthy boy." Tears streamed down Astria's face as they lifted her son above the surgical drape. He was perfect, a full head of dark curls, strong limbs flailing against the bright lights, and when he opened his eyes briefly, she saw they were the exact shade of steel grey that had first drawn her to Dominic. "Atlas," she whispered, the name she had chosen months ago coming naturally to her lips. Like the titan who held up the world, this child would give her the strength to bear whatever weight came next. As the surgical team finished closing her incision, Elena's phone finally buzzed. Her friend's face darkened as she read the message. "He's asking for a photo," Elena said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Says he's in conference and can't get away." Astria closed her eyes, feeling the last remnants of hope crumble away. "Take the picture," she said quietly. "Let him see what he chose to miss." Elena snapped a photo of newborn Atlas, his features still scrunched from his journey into the world, his tiny hand gripping the finger of a nurse who showed more care for him in that moment than his father had in 9 months of pregnancy. Hours later, recovered enough to hold her son properly, Astria sat in her private room watching Atlas sleep. His features were a perfect blend of her and Dominic, genetic heritage expressed in miniature. As a scientist, she could appreciate the miraculous complexity of DNA combining to create this new life. As a mother, she felt a fierce love that transcended all scientific understanding. Elena had gone home to rest, but not before setting up a laptop that displayed Astria's research data. Even now, her cancer trials were showing promising results, proving that she hadn't had to choose between motherhood and scientific advancement. She had managed both, despite Dominic's dire predictions about career sacrifice. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A nurse entered carrying a thick envelope. "This was left at the nurse's station for you, Doctor." Blackwood. Astria's heart stuttered as she recognized the letterhead of Boston's most prestigious law firm. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope, though some part of her already knew what she would find inside. Divorce papers, and a note written in Dominic's precise surgical handwriting. "The child doesn't resemble me. DNA test required. All contact through my lawyer." The words blurred as tears filled her eyes, not of sadness, but of pure, incandescent rage. In her arms, Atlas stirred, his tiny hand reaching up to grasp her finger with surprising strength. Looking down at him, seeing Dominic's eyes set in a face that was undeniably a blend of them both, Astria felt something crystallize within her. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a challenge. And if there was one thing Astria Blackwood excelled at, it was rising to challenges. She reached for her phone, sending a quick text to Elena. "I need you to pull every record we've gathered. And contact that private investigator you mentioned. It's time to understand exactly what kind of man Dominic Thorne really is." Atlas made a small sound in his sleep, and Astria bent to kiss his forehead. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered. Your mother is a scientist, and scientists are very, very good at uncovering truth. Outside her window, a storm was breaking over Boston, lightning illuminating the medical district in stark flashes of brilliance. It seemed fitting, nature itself acknowledging the magnitude of Dominic's betrayal and the strength of her resolve. The storm that was coming wouldn't be confined to the skies above Boston. It would sweep through the medical community, through carefully constructed lies and precisely maintained facades. And when it was over, Dominic Thorne would learn that he hadn't just betrayed a wife, he had awakened a force of nature. But for now, Astria held her son close, memorizing every perfect feature of his tiny face. The papers could wait. The investigation could wait. This moment, this precious time with her newborn son, was all that mattered. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, its own discoveries, its own revelations. Tonight, in a room that smelled of antiseptic and new life, Astria Blackwood began planning a revenge that would be as precise and devastating as any surgical procedure Dominic had ever performed. Chapter 5. The Betrayal. The sterile hospital room felt colder somehow, as Astria held the divorce papers in one hand while cradling Atlas with the other. The morning light filtering through the window cast harsh shadows across the legal documents, their formal language a stark contrast to the soft newborn sounds of her son. DNA test required, she read again, each word burning like acid. The phrase was typed in bold on a separate attachment, followed by Dominic's signature, the same precise strokes she had once admired on their marriage certificate. Below it, a sticky note in his surgeon's handwriting: "The child bears no resemblance to me. All future communication through legal channels only." Elena stood by the window, her normally calm demeanor replaced by barely contained fury. "He's claiming no resemblance? The baby has his exact eyes. I've never seen a more obvious genetic match." Astria looked down at Atlas, sleeping peacefully in her arms. Indeed, he was a perfect blend of both parents. Dominic's steel-grey eyes and dark hair, her own delicate features and olive skin tone. The suggestion that he wasn't their child was more than absurd. It was deliberately cruel. "He knows," Astria said quietly, her scientific mind already analyzing the situation. "He knows exactly who Atlas's father is. This isn't about doubt, it's about escape." A soft knock interrupted their conversation. Dr. Chen entered carrying Atlas's medical charts. She stopped short when she saw the papers spread across Astria's bed. "I just heard," the OB-GYN said, her face darkening. "The nurses are... well, the entire maternity ward is talking about it. No one can believe he would do this." Astria managed a bitter smile. "You'd be surprised what people are capable of, especially those who appear most respectable on the surface." Dr. Chen approached the bed, her expression professional but her eyes sympathetic. "I've known Dominic Thorne for years through the hospital. He's always been calculating. But this," she gestured to the divorce papers, "this is beyond calculation. This is cruelty." "Not just cruelty," Elena interjected, pulling out her tablet. "This is premeditated. Look at the date on these papers. They were drawn up 3 weeks ago. He's been planning this, waiting for the birth." The realization hit Astria like a physical blow. 3 weeks ago, Dominic had still been coming home occasionally, still maintaining the facade of an expectant father. He had sat across from her at dinner, discussed hospital politics, all while having divorce papers ready in his briefcase. "The timing isn't coincidental," she said, her voice taking on the analytical tone she used in research presentations. "He waited until after the birth to avoid any legal complications regarding prenatal care or birth expenses. He probably consulted with his lawyers about the most advantageous moment to serve these papers." Dr. Chen checked Atlas's vitals as she spoke. The hospital board will have questions. Dominic's reputation. His reputation, Astria interrupted, a new edge in her voice. That's what this is really about, isn't it? The great Dr. Thorne, abandoning his wife and newborn son, claiming paternity doubts despite obvious genetic markers. He's not just leaving us. He's trying to control the narrative. Elena was already typing furiously on her tablet. The timing of the paper's preparation coincides with his last 3 emergency consultations in New York. He wasn't consulting on cases. He was consulting with lawyers. A strange calm settled over Astria as the pieces began falling into place. Her months of tracking Dominic's movements, documenting his absences, and noting discrepancies in his schedule had been leading to this moment. Like a complex chemical reaction reaching its inevitable conclusion, everything was becoming clear. He's used to being in control, she mused, gently stroking Atlas's cheek as he stirred in his sleep. In the operating room, in the hospital hierarchy, in our marriage. This, she gestured to the divorce papers, this is his attempt to maintain that control. By striking first, by making outrageous claims about paternity, he's trying to put me on the defensive. We can fight this, Elena declared. We have months of documented evidence of his behavior, his lies about his whereabouts, and a simple DNA test will prove Atlas is his son. No, Astria said, her voice suddenly firm. We're not going to fight this, not the way he expects. Both Elena and Dr. Chen looked at her questioningly. Dominic thinks he knows me, Astria continued, her mind racing with possibilities. He expects the brilliant but emotional researcher, the new mother too, overwhelmed by betrayal, to think clearly. He's prepared for tears, for public scenes, for desperate attempts to prove Atlas is his son. A cold smile crossed her face. But he's forgotten something crucial. What's that? Elena asked. I'm a scientist, and scientists don't react. We analyze, we plan, and we execute with precision. Astria shifted Atlas in her arms, looking down at his peaceful face. He wants a DNA test? Fine, we'll give him one. But first, I want every piece of information about his movements over the past year, every surgery he claimed to perform, every consultation he said he attended. Elena was already reaching for her phone. I'll contact that private investigator I mentioned, and I have friends in hospital administration who can help us access records. Dr. Chen stepped forward, her face set with determination. The medical board might be interested in some of the discrepancies in his surgical schedules, especially if they coincide with these lawyer visits. Astria nodded, feeling a strange energy coursing through her veins. Something beyond anger or hurt, something cold and calculating and perfectly focused. He thinks serving divorce papers in the maternity ward is his power move. He has no idea what real power is. She looked down at the papers again, noting the law firm's prestigious address. Elena, I need you to do something else for me. Find out everything you can about Dominic's other cases. Not his surgical cases, but any other legal issues he might have been involved in. Malpractice suits, settlements, anything that might have been quietly resolved. You think there are others? Dr. Chen asked, understanding dawning in her eyes. Men like Dominic don't suddenly become cruel, Astria replied. They just get better at hiding it. I want to know every skeleton in his closet, every decision he's ever made that he wouldn't want the medical board to examine too closely. Atlas stirred again, making small sounds that already seemed to pierce straight to her heart. Astria held him closer, breathing in his newborn scent, letting it fuel her resolve. You know what's ironic? She said, looking up at her friends. All those months when he was pushing me to focus on my research instead of the pregnancy, he was right about one thing. I am on the verge of something revolutionary, just not in the way he imagined. Elena raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Astria's smile was cold and precise as a scalpel. My cancer research is about identifying destructive cells and systematically eliminating them, returning the body to proper function. In a way, that's exactly what I'm going to do to Dominic's carefully constructed world. She reached for her phone, pulling up her contacts with her free hand. First, we need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but someone who specializes in both medical law and personal injury. Someone who understands how to dissect a reputation as precisely as Dominic dissects brain tissue. I know someone, Dr. Chen offered. She's handled several high-profile medical cases. She has a particular interest in cases involving ethical breaches. Astria nodded. Perfect. Set up a meeting. But first, she looked down at the divorce papers, then at her son's peaceful face. First, we're going to give Dominic exactly what he's asking for. Elena, please contact the hospital's lab. I want a DNA test done immediately, the most comprehensive genetic panel they can run. Are you sure? Elena asked. We could fight the request, make him file formally through the courts. No, Astria replied, her voice steady. We're going to prove Atlas is his son, definitively and irrefutably. And then we're going to make him wish he had never questioned it. The morning light had strengthened, casting Astria's shadow long across the hospital room floor. In her arms, Atlas slept on, unaware of the storm gathering around him. His tiny hand gripped her finger with surprising strength, and in that grip, she felt her resolve harden into something unbreakable. Dominic had orchestrated what he thought was a perfect betrayal, coldly calculated, legally sound, designed to leave her devastated and defensive. But he had made a crucial error in his calculations. He had forgotten that she too was trained in precision, in careful observation, in the methodical dismantling of complex systems. The divorce papers lay on her bed like a challenge, their legal language a roadmap to Dominic's supposed victory. But Astria saw them differently now, not as an ending, but as the beginning of something he would never see coming. You know, she said quietly, more to herself than to her friends, in science, we're taught that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Dominic's about to learn just how true that is. The betrayal was complete, but so was her transformation. The trusting wife was gone, replaced by something altogether more dangerous, a brilliant mind with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Let him think he had won this round. Let him believe his calculated cruelty had broken her. Soon enough, he would learn that some experiments yield unexpected results, and some reactions, once set in motion, cannot be controlled. Chapter 6. Rising from Ashes. 3 days after receiving the divorce papers, Astria stood in what had once been their shared penthouse apartment, Atlas sleeping peacefully in his carrier. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the space that suddenly felt both too empty and too full of memories. The DNA test results lay on the kitchen counter, a comprehensive genetic panel that proved beyond any doubt what was already obvious to anyone with eyes. Atlas was undeniably Dominic's son. Every genetic marker, every inherited trait, documented with scientific precision. She had sent copies to Dominic's lawyers that morning, her response as clinical as his betrayal had been. The movers will be here in an hour, Eleanor announced, entering with a stack of collapsed boxes. She had taken indefinite leave from the lab to help Astria transition, proving that some bonds went deeper than professional courtesy. I'm not moving out, Astria said quietly, her voice carrying the same steel that had earned her respect in the medical research community. This apartment was purchased with my research grant money. The deed is in my name alone. One of the few things Dominic's pride wouldn't let him share. Elena smiled, a fierce expression that showed her approval. Then we're not packing your things. We're removing his. Together, they moved through the apartment with surgical precision. Dominic's elegant suits, his collected medical journals, his precious awards, all carefully boxed and labelled. Astria worked methodically, her movements efficient and controlled, as if she were conducting another experiment in her lab. "His personal laptop," Elena said, finding the device in his study. "Should we leave it?" Astria interrupted. "The hospital's IT department is already doing a comprehensive audit of his work computers. Besides, she smiled coldly, "I have something more interesting." She crossed to the bedroom, Atlas still sleeping in his carrier nearby, and retrieved a small notebook from her bedside drawer. "While tracking his movements these past months, I started keeping notes, times, dates, discrepancies. A scientist's habit. Document everything." Elena took the notebook, flipping through pages of Astria's precise handwriting. "This is comprehensive. When you're researching a cure for cancer, you learn to pay attention to details," Astria replied. "Patterns emerge if you watch long enough, like how Dominic's emergency consultations often coincided with certain charity events where he was photographed with the same rotating cast of characters." She pulled out her tablet, bringing up several society page photos. In each one, Dominic appeared in his element. The brilliant surgeon at fundraising galas, medical conferences, charity auctions. But in the background of several images, the same faces appeared repeatedly. "I had the private investigator look into these individuals," Astria continued, her voice taking on the tone she used when presenting research findings. "Turns out they're all connected to a private medical consulting firm, a firm that's been involved in some questionable practices." Elena's eyes widened as she made the connection. "You think Dominic's involvement goes beyond just attending the same events?" "I know it does." Astria moved to her desk, retrieving a file she'd compiled. "The consulting firm specializes in managing difficult cases, wealthy patients who want discretion, experimental treatments that might not meet standard ethical guidelines, the kind of work that could make or break a surgeon's reputation." Atlas stirred in his carrier, making small sounds that instantly drew Astria to his side. She lifted him gently, cradling him against her chest as she continued her explanation. "Dominic's surgical success rate is impressive. Too impressive when you look closely at the numbers. Cases that should have been challenging somehow turned out perfectly. Patients with complicated conditions making miraculous recoveries." "You think he was manipulating his cases?" Elena asked, horror creeping into her voice. "I think," Astria replied carefully, "that success in medicine often comes down to patient selection. Choose the right cases, avoid the risky ones, and your statistics look remarkable." The consulting firm helped him cherry-pick his patients, ensuring his reputation stayed pristine, while more challenging cases were quietly referred elsewhere. She walked to the window, showing Atlas the Boston skyline that had witnessed so much of their family's unraveling. But that's just the beginning. The private investigator found something else, something Dominic probably thought was buried too deep to discover. Elena leaned forward, her expression intense. "What?" "Records of 3 other women," Astria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "All connected to hospitals where Dominic had done fellowships or consultations. All single mothers now, their children's birth dates spread across the past decade." The implications hung in the air like smoke. Elena sank into a nearby chair, processing what she'd just heard. "He's done this before." "Not exactly like this," Astria clarified. "The other cases were more casual. No marriages, no divorce papers. Just women he charmed and abandoned once they became pregnant. But the pattern is clear. He moves on when commitment becomes real, when his perfect image might be threatened." She looked down at Atlas, who had opened his eyes, those unmistakable steel-grey eyes that would forever remind her of his father. He thought sending divorce papers to my hospital room was his masterstroke. He thought questioning paternity would devastate me, make me emotional and irrational. A cold smile played across her lips. But he forgot something crucial about me, about who I am at my core. I'm not just a researcher working on cancer treatments. I'm someone who understands how to break down complex systems, how to identify weaknesses, how to strategically dismantle what appears impenetrable. Eleanor stood, moving to stand beside her friend. What's your plan? First, we use the DNA test results. Not just to prove Atlas is his, but to establish a pattern. We find those other women, those other children. We show them they're not alone, that their stories are part of a larger narrative. She moved to her desk, Atlas still cradled in one arm, and pulled up her research center's financial records. Then we look at the money, the consulting firm, the selective patient practices, the statistical anomalies in his success rates. We build a case not just about personal betrayal, but about professional ethics. The medical board would be very interested in that kind of information, Elena noted. Yes, but we move carefully, precisely. Like a surgeon removing a tumor, we need to ensure we get everything while causing minimal collateral damage. Astria's voice took on a harder edge. Dominic's reputation is everything to him. His carefully curated image as the brilliant ethical surgeon is the foundation of his power. We don't just expose his lies, we systematically dismantle the very system that allowed him to build those lies in the first place. She sat at her desk, pulling up a document she'd been working on. I'm expanding my research center, using the breakthrough data from our latest trials to secure additional funding. I've already had offers from 3 major pharmaceutical companies. The board of directors is being restructured, and guess who they want as the new chairperson? Elena's eyes lit up with understanding. You'll have institutional power. More than that, Astria replied. I'll have legitimacy that doesn't come from being Dr. Thorne's wife. I'll have resources he can't touch, influence he can't counter. And most importantly, she looked down at Atlas, who had drifted back to sleep against her chest. I'll have a platform to make sure no one else becomes another statistic in Dominic's pattern of betrayal. The movers arrived right on schedule, efficiently removing every trace of Dominic from the apartment. Astria watched them work, bouncing Atlas gently when he fussed, her mind already racing with the next steps in her plan. You know what my mother used to say about scientific breakthroughs? She asked Elena as the last box disappeared down the hallway. She said the most important discoveries often come from failure, from experiments that don't go as planned, from hypotheses that prove false. Because when our carefully constructed theories fall apart, we're forced to see the truth that was there all along. She walked through the apartment one last time, noting how much lighter it felt without Dominic's presence. The space that had witnessed their whirlwind romance and subsequent betrayal would now become something else. A command center for what was to come, a sanctuary for her and Atlas, a place where new plans would take shape. Dominic thought serving those divorce papers was an ending, she said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had made her one of the youngest department heads in the hospital's history. He thought he was writing the final chapter of our story, but he forgot something fundamental about both science and life. What's that? Eleanor asked, though her smile suggested she already knew the answer. Sometimes, when everything burns down, what rises from the ashes is stronger than what came before. Astria looked down at her son, seeing in his innocent face all the possibility and promise that lay ahead. Dominic wanted to break me. Instead, he's about to learn what I'm truly capable of when I have nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The sun had risen fully now, bathing the apartment in golden light. Outside, Boston's medical district hummed with activity, unaware that within its midst a revolution was brewing. Not of medicine this time, but of justice, of revenge, served not hot with emotion, but cold with calculation. Astria Blackwood, no longer just a brilliant researcher or betrayed wife, stood in her transformed space, her son in her arms and her mind clear with purpose. The ashes of her old life settled around her, but from them, something new and powerful was already beginning to rise. Chapter 7. The Prodigy's Rise. "Mommy, I found something interesting." Atlas's voice rang through the halls of the Blackwood Institute, drawing curious smiles from passing researchers. At 3 years old, he already commanded attention like a tiny professor, his lab coat a perfect miniature of his mother's. Astria looked up from her computer screen, where headlines about her latest breakthrough scrolled endlessly. Revolutionary cancer treatment shows 94% success rate. Blackwood protocol transforms oncology. Medical pioneer reshapes future of cancer care. But none of these achievements compared to the miracle standing before her, clutching a self-designed molecular model with those hauntingly familiar steel-grey eyes bright with discovery. "Look!" Atlas carefully placed his creation on her desk. "I made the double helix structure, but I added something different here." His small fingers pointed to a modification that made Astria's breath catch. Unknowingly, her 3-year-old had suggested a molecular variation that could potentially enhance her treatment's effectiveness. Elena, working nearby, exchanged a meaningful glance with Astria. They both saw it. Dominic's brilliant analytical mind, combined with Astria's innovative thinking, manifesting in a child who might someday revolutionize medicine in ways neither parent had imagined. "The others will want to see this," Elena said softly, referring to the network they'd built over the past 3 years. Through careful investigation, they had discovered Dominic's pattern of abandoned families. Dr. Rachel Chen's 12-year-old James, already winning national science competitions, Dr. Maria Santos's brilliant Michael at 7, Dr. Sarah Williams's Christopher, showing surgical precision in art at 6, Dr. Jennifer Martinez's Daniel, and Dr. Catherine Walsh's David, 5-year-old twins, separated by circumstance, both already reading medical textbooks meant for students 4 times their age. The security feed on Astria's computer showed another image. Dominic arriving at Massachusetts General Hospital across the street, still commanding respect in his pristine surgical scrubs, unaware that his carefully constructed world was about to shatter. "Dr. Blackwood." Her assistant appeared at the door. "The test results you've been waiting for are in." Astria nodded, pulling up the secure files. The screen filled with data. Not medical research this time, but the results of a different kind of investigation. Bank records, travel logs, professional appointments spanning 15 years. The pattern was undeniable. Cities across the country, brilliant medical professionals charmed and abandoned, careers systematically undermined through the Thorne family's influence. "Atlas, sweetheart," she called to her son, who was now explaining complex molecular bonds to a fascinated group of postdoctoral researchers. "Would you like to show everyone your new theory about protein folding?" He beamed, setting up his demonstration with the precise movements that reminded her achingly of his father. But where Dominic's precision had been cold, calculated for personal gain, Atlas's brilliance shone with genuine joy and curiosity. The past 3 years had transformed both mother and son. The Blackwood Institute's success had made Astria one of the most powerful figures in modern medicine, her influence extending far beyond research. But Atlas's development had been even more remarkable. The protein structure changes when Atlas began, his vocabulary far beyond his years, drawing diagrams that made senior researchers exchange astonished looks. Elena approached with another tablet. The other mothers sent updates. "All 7 boys are showing extraordinary abilities. It's like the Thorne family genius without the Thorne family corruption," Astria finished. She pulled up images on her screen. 7 boys, with those distinctive steel-grey eyes, each excelling in ways that would have made their father proud, had he not chosen to abandon them. James, the oldest at 12, already publishing papers in junior science journals. Alexander, 8 years old, developing new mathematical models. Michael, 7, with his gift for cellular biology. Christopher, 6, showing incredible spatial reasoning skills. The 5-year-old twins, Daniel and David, each brilliant in their own way. And Atlas, the youngest at 3, already showing signs of surpassing them all. "The foundation is ready," Elena reported, referring to the educational trust Astria had established. "Full funding for all 7 boys, plus resources for any others we might discover." Astria watched as Atlas moved to his research station, a carefully child-proofed corner of her office, equipped with scientific tools designed for small hands. He had already learned to use a microscope, his tiny fingers as steady as any surgeon's. "Have you seen the latest from Mass General?" Elena asked quietly, pulling up a news alert. "Dominic's being considered for chief of surgery when his uncle retires." "Perfect timing," Astria replied, her smile cold and precise. "Everything's in place. The board votes next week and our evidence is ready." A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Dr. Rachel Chen had arrived with James for the Institute's Young Scientists program. The 12-year-old boy was a striking image of his father at that age. The same confident stride, the same analytical gaze. But instead of Dominic's calculated charm, James radiated genuine enthusiasm for discovery. "Atlas!" James called out, hurrying to his youngest brother's workstation. The age gap disappeared as they began discussing molecular structures with shared passion. Astria watched the interaction with a mixture of pride and strategic satisfaction. These boys, meant to be Dominic's secret shame, were instead becoming his most powerful legacy, but not in the way he had ever intended. Through the window, she could see the towers of Mass General, where Dominic still performed his carefully selected surgeries, building his reputation operation by operation. He had no idea that across the street, in the institute bearing his ex-wife's name, his abandoned sons were growing into something extraordinary. "The prodigy's rise isn't just about Atlas," she told Elena, watching the boys work together. "It's about all of them, each one brilliant, each one gifted with their father's medical genius. But unlike him, they're learning to use those gifts for healing rather than self-advancement." Her computer pinged with another alert. The final pieces of evidence had arrived. Everything was in place for the coming storm. But watching Atlas and James collaborate on their molecular model, their grey eyes bright with discovery, Astria felt no triumph in her planned revenge. Instead, she saw the future of medicine in these boys, a future where brilliance served humanity rather than ego, where genetic gifts were used for healing rather than personal gain. The prodigy's rise wasn't just about scientific achievement, it was about transforming a legacy of betrayal into something revolutionary. Let Dominic continue his surgeries, unaware that his greatest achievements weren't in the operating room, but in the children he had abandoned. These boys would change the world of medicine, but they would do it bearing their mothers' names, guided by ethics their father had never understood. The prodigy was rising, but not alone. 7 brilliant minds, 7 sets of steel-grey eyes, 7 chances to prove that greatness could grow from betrayal, that healing could emerge from harm. And leading them all, a 3-year-old boy who had inherited his father's gifts, but his mother's heart. Atlas looked up from his work, beaming with pure joy as he made another discovery. In that smile, Astria saw the future she had been building, not just of medicine, but of justice served through excellence rather than vengeance. The prodigy's rise had begun, and with it, the ultimate transformation of the Thorn legacy. Chapter 8. Wheels within wheels. The private investigator's office was nothing like the sleek, modern spaces Astria had grown accustomed to. Maya Richardson worked from an old brownstone in Boston's Back Bay, its worn leather chairs and wood-paneled walls suggesting discretion rather than prestige. But the wall of monitors behind her desk told a different story, each screen displaying fragments of lives carefully pieced together over months of meticulous investigation. "The pattern goes deeper than we initially thought," Maya said, pulling up a series of documents. "Dominic Thorne's perfect reputation isn't just built on selective surgeries. It's an entire constructed narrative going back to his residency days." Astria leaned forward, her designer suit a stark contrast to the weathered surroundings. On one screen, a younger Dominic smiled at a hospital fundraiser, his arm around a woman who wasn't among the 5 they'd already identified. The timestamp showed it was from 8 years ago. "Tell me everything," Astria commanded, her voice carrying the authority that had become her trademark. Maya nodded, pulling up more files. "Let's start with his residency at Johns Hopkins. His record shows a perfect progression, top of his class, groundbreaking research, innovative surgical techniques. But," she typed rapidly, bringing up archived records, "there are inconsistencies. Cases that disappeared from the records, patients whose outcomes were mysteriously revised. How did no one notice this before? Because the changes were made by someone with high-level access to the hospital's systems. Someone like—" Maya paused for effect. "Chief of Surgery Carlton Thorne, Dominic's uncle." Astria's eyes narrowed. She had met Carlton Thorne exactly once, at their wedding. He had given a speech about the Thorne family's medical legacy, generations of surgeons who had advanced the field of neurosurgery. Now that legacy was revealing itself as something far more sinister. "The family connection explains a lot," Maya continued, bringing up more documents. "Every time Dominic faced a potential setback, someone in the Thorne medical dynasty stepped in. Failed procedures were reassigned to other surgeons. Complicated cases with poor outcomes vanished from his record. It's not just about skill, it's about systematic manipulation of the entire system." A notification popped up on one of the screens, an email from their contact in hospital administration. Maya opened it, her expression growing more intense. "This just came in. Remember those private consulting firms we were tracking? Turns out they're all shell companies, ultimately leading back to a single holding company. Care to guess who owns it?" "Carlton Thorne," Astria replied, the pieces falling into place. "Exactly. The entire operation, from patient selection to outcome reporting, is controlled by the Thorne family. They've created a perfect pipeline. Wealthy patients seeking discretion are channeled through the consulting firms, their cases pre-screened to ensure optimal outcomes. Difficult cases are quietly referred elsewhere, while successes are prominently documented and published." Astria stood, walking to the window that overlooked the Boston Common. In the distance, she could see the towers of the medical district where her own institute now stood. And the women. "The abandoned children." Maya's expression darkened. "That's where it gets worse. We've found 2 more since our last meeting, 7 in total now, spanning the past 12 years. Each case follows the same pattern. Brilliant medical professionals, brief relationships, pregnancies, abandonment. But here's the twist. Each woman's career suffered mysterious setbacks after Dominic left. Grant funding suddenly dried up, research opportunities disappeared, promotions were inexplicably denied." "The Thorne family influence," Astria murmured, thinking of her own meteoric rise after the divorce. She had succeeded not just through brilliance but by building her own power base independent of traditional medical hierarchies. Precisely. They didn't just protect Dominic, they systematically undermined anyone who might threaten his reputation. But they made one crucial mistake. "What's that?" Maya smiled grimly. "They never expected one of their victims to fight back with the same level of systematic precision." Your research breakthrough changed the game, Doctor. Blackwood, you've built something they can't control or undermine. Astria returned to her seat, pulling out her tablet. Show me the other children. The screens filled with photos, boys ranging from age 5 to 12, all bearing Dominic's unmistakable features. School records showed they were all exceptional students, many already displaying the same prodigious intellect as Atlas. Have you made contact with the mothers? Carefully, Maya replied. Most are understandably hesitant. The Thorne family's influence has left deep scars. But when they learned about your position, about what you've built, she pulled up a series of email responses. They're ready to talk. Astria studied the faces of these women, accomplished professionals whose careers had been derailed by the same man who had tried to destroy her. But unlike them, she had turned destruction into fuel for her rise to power. We need more, she said, her voice taking on the same precision she used in her laboratory. Bank records, property holdings, every connection between the consulting firms and the Thorne family medical empire. I want to understand exactly how deep this goes. Maya nodded, pulling up another set of files. Already on it. We found some interesting transactions between the consulting firms and offshore accounts, and there's something else. Medical malpractice cases that were settled quietly, with the records sealed. Unseal them, Astria commanded, whatever it takes. It won't be cheap. Money isn't an issue. Astria smiled coldly. My latest pharmaceutical patent just sold for 9 figures. Consider this another research investment. As if on cue, her phone buzzed with a message from Elena. Atlas just finished his advanced mathematics tutorial. He's asking about coming to the lab later. Looking at the message, Astria felt the familiar mix of pride and pain. Her son's brilliant mind was undeniably a Thorne family trait, but she would ensure it was used for healing rather than harm. There's one more thing, Maya said, her voice hesitant. We found something in the sealed records that might explain Dominic's pattern. She pulled up a decades-old newspaper article, its headline faded but still legible. Prominent surgeon's secret family revealed. The photo showed a younger Carlton Thorne, his career nearly derailed by the discovery of children he had fathered and abandoned. Like father, like son, Astria asked bitterly. Like uncle, like nephew, Maya corrected. Carlton isn't just Dominic's mentor. He's his father's brother, and according to our research, Dominic's father did the same thing. It's not just a pattern of behavior, it's a family legacy. The revelation hit Astria like a physical blow. The Thorne medical dynasty wasn't just about surgical excellence. It was about systematic exploitation, about men who viewed brilliance as a license to behave without consequences. Pull everything, she ordered, her voice steel. Every case, every settlement, every sealed record. I want to understand not just Dominic's pattern, but the entire Thorne family history. This isn't just about exposing one surgeon anymore. It's about dismantling a dynasty built on destruction. Maya was already typing, her screens filling with new searches. What about the other women? When do we bring them together? Astria checked her watch. Almost time for Atlas's lab visit. Set up a secure meeting. Use the conference facility at my institute. It's time these women understood they're not alone, and more importantly, that they're not powerless. Standing to leave, she paused at Maya's door. One more thing. I want detailed profiles on every Thorne family member involved in medicine. Carlton, his brothers, their children, every connection, every appointment, every achievement. You're going after the entire family. No, Astria replied, her smile razor-sharp. I'm going to give them exactly what they fear most, exposure. Let them see how it feels to have their carefully constructed narratives torn apart, their perfect reputations examined under the same microscope they've used to destroy others. As she drove to her institute to meet Atlas, Astria's mind raced with the implications of what they'd discovered. The wheels within wheels of the Thorn family's influence had been turning for generations, crushing dreams and destroying lives with mechanical precision. But wheels could be reversed, systems could be dismantled, and dynasties, no matter how powerful, could fall when their foundations were exposed as rot. Her phone buzzed again. Elena sending a photo of Atlas proudly displaying his mathematics work. In her son's brilliant smile, Astria saw hope for a different kind of legacy. The Thorn family's gifts for medicine and mathematics wouldn't end with their dynasty of destruction. Through Atlas, and through the other children they had abandoned, those gifts would be transformed into something healing rather than harmful. The wheels were turning now in a new direction, and not even the combined power of the Thorn medical dynasty could stop what was coming. The truth, like cancer under a microscope, was about to become devastatingly clear. Chapter 9. The Web Tightens. The conference room of the Blackwood Institute hummed with tension as 7 women sat around the polished table, each cradling a thick folder of documents. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Boston Medical District sprawled below them, its familiar buildings now carrying new meaning as the extent of the Thorn family's influence became clear. Astria stood at the head of the table, her pristine lab coat a reminder of the professional power she wielded. On the wall behind her, a projection displayed photographs and data, the carefully gathered evidence of years of systematic betrayal. "What you're about to see," she began, her voice steady, "is more than just a pattern of personal betrayal. Why don't skeletons fight each other? They don't have the guts. It's evidence of a systematic abuse of power that spans 3 generations of the Thorn medical dynasty." The women, accomplished doctors, researchers and medical professionals, leaned forward as Astria began her presentation. Each had their own story of falling for Dominic Thorne's charm, of pregnancy followed by abandonment, of careers mysteriously derailed in the aftermath. Dr. Rachel Chen, Astria indicated the first woman, a renowned immunologist. "Your research funding was suddenly withdrawn 3 months after Dominic disappeared. The official reason was reallocation of resources, but our investigation reveals direct interference from Carlton Thorne's position on the grant committee." Rachel nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to a photo of her son, a brilliant 8-year-old with Dominic's steel-grey eyes. "Dr. Maria Santos," Astria continued, highlighting another file. "Your groundbreaking surgical technique was mysteriously credited to another researcher after your relationship with Dominic ended. That researcher had connections to the Thorn family's private consulting firm." One by one, Astria laid out the evidence. Careers sabotaged, opportunities blocked, professional reputations subtly undermined. The pattern was clear. The Thorn family didn't just abandon women. They systematically destroyed anyone who might threaten their carefully constructed narrative. "But they made a crucial mistake," Astria said, pulling up new data on the screen. "They were so focused on maintaining their perfect image that they left a trail. Every manipulated record, every redirected grant, every buried malpractice case. It's all documented. You just have to know where to look." Eleanor, seated at Astria's right, distributed additional folders. These contain evidence of the Thorn family's involvement in various medical consulting firms that have been used to channel patients, manipulate surgical success rates, and hide less favorable outcomes. "Why show us this now?" asked Dr. Sarah Williams, a pediatric surgeon whose 5-year-old son was another member of Dominic's abandoned legacy. "Because the time has come to fight back," Astria replied, her voice taking on an edge of steel, "not individually, but together. The Thorn family's power comes from isolation, keeping each case separate, each victim feeling alone, but united." She pressed a button, and the screen filled with new information. I've spent 3 years building something they can't control or destroy. The Blackwood Institute isn't just a research facility. It's a platform for change. And as of this morning, we've gained controlling interest in Mass General's board of directors. The women exchanged glances, beginning to understand the scope of Astria's plan. Through various shell companies and investment firms, Elena explained, we've quietly acquired enough influence to force a full audit of the hospital's practices, including a review of all cases handled by the Thorne family's consulting firms. They'll fight back, Dr. Chen warned. They have connections everywhere. Astria smiled coldly. They'll try. But unlike their previous victims, we're not fighting alone or in the dark. Every document in front of you has been legally obtained and verified. Every connection has been documented, and most importantly, she paused, bringing up a new screen. We have this. The projection showed a series of offshore accounts, all linking back to the Thorne family's consulting firms. Transactions that coincided with suspicious case outcomes, with redirected patients, with buried malpractice settlements. Dominic isn't just climbing the ladder at Mass General, Astria continued. He's being positioned to take over as chief of surgery when his uncle retires, a position that would give him unprecedented power to continue their family's practices. Unless we stop him, Dr. Santos said, understanding dawning in her eyes. Exactly. But we're not just going to stop him. We're going to expose the entire system that allowed this to happen. Astria pressed another button, revealing a complex organizational chart. The ethics committee I've established isn't just about reviewing current practices. It's about examining the entire history of patient care, surgical outcomes, and professional appointments. Elena distributed another set of documents. These are legally binding agreements. By signing, you'll be officially joining the class action lawsuit against not just Dominic, but the entire Thorne medical enterprise. Your testimony, combined with the documentary evidence we've gathered, will be impossible to ignore or suppress. The women studied the papers, years of pain and anger crystallizing into resolve. One by one, they began to sign. What about our children? Dr. Williams asked, voicing the concern they all shared. The Thorne's influence, they could retaliate. That's why we've also prepared this, Astria replied, revealing another document. A trust fund established through the Blackwood Institute to ensure all of our children's educational and professional futures are secured. The Thorne family's genetic gifts for medicine shouldn't be tainted by their ethical failures. As if on cue, the door opened and Atlas entered with his caregiver. At 3, he already moved with his father's precise grace, but his smile was pure joy as he ran to his mother. Perfect timing, Astria said, lifting him onto her hip. Ladies, this is Atlas. Like your children, he represents something the Thorne family never expected. The continuation of their medical legacy, but guided by ethics and compassion rather than ambition and control. The women watched as Atlas pulled out his ever-present notebook, already filled with the careful drawings and notes that marked him as a prodigy. In him, they saw echoes of their own children, brilliant minds that deserved better than their father's abandonment. The board meeting is tomorrow, Elena announced, checking her tablet. Dominic is scheduled to present his proposal for expanding the neurosurgery department. He has no idea that half the board members now answer to us. Astria nodded, setting Atlas down to return to his studies. Tomorrow is just the beginning. The ethics committee findings will be released next week, followed by the class action filing. The media has already been quietly briefed. They're just waiting for the signal. And Carlton Thorne, Dr. Chen asked, his influence is based entirely on the perception of the family's surgical excellence, Astria finished. Once that perception is challenged by documented evidence of manipulation and malpractice, his power becomes a liability rather than an asset. The women spent the next several hours reviewing evidence, sharing stories, and strengthening their resolve. As they prepared to leave, each stopping to hug Atlas and share pictures of their own children, Astria felt the web of connection growing stronger. Later that evening, after Atlas was asleep, Astria stood in her office, reviewing the final preparations. The evidence was irrefutable, the timing perfect, the strategy precise. Tomorrow, Dominic would walk into that board meeting expecting another step up the ladder of success. Instead, he would find himself facing the beginning of his dynasty's downfall. Her phone buzzed with a message from Maya, the private investigator. Final piece confirmed. Carlton Thorne's original malpractice cases unsealed. It's worse than we thought. Astria smiled grimly. Let Dominic enjoy his last night of perfect reputation. Tomorrow, the carefully constructed world of the Thorne medical dynasty would begin to unravel, thread by precise thread. The web had tightened, each strand carefully placed over years of patient planning. Now it was time to watch their empire fall, caught in a trap of their own making. Through the window, she could see the lights of Mass General, where Dominic was probably performing another perfectly selected surgery, unaware that his world was about to shatter. Like the cancer cells she studied in her lab, his career would be systematically destroyed, leaving no possibility of regeneration. The web was tight, the evidence secure, the allies united. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of the end for the Thorne medical dynasty. And Astria would watch it fall, knowing that justice sometimes required a surgeon's precision and a scientist's patience. Chapter 10. First Strike. The morning of the hospital board meeting dawned crisp and clear over Boston's medical district. Astria stood in her office at the Blackwood Institute, watching the early sun glint off the windows of Massachusetts General Hospital. In her hand, she held a thick manila envelope, the culmination of 3 years of meticulous planning. "The Times is ready," Eleanor reported, entering with a tablet displaying multiple news site layouts. "The Wall Street Journal and the Boston Globe, too. They'll publish the moment we give the signal." Astria nodded, her attention caught by movement in the hospital's parking lot. A familiar silver Mercedes was pulling into the chief of surgery's reserved space. Even from this distance, she could make out Dominic's confident stride as he emerged, briefcase in hand, entirely unaware that this would be his last morning of untarnished reputation. "Are the other women in position?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Everything had been choreographed with surgical precision. Dr. Chen is already in the hospital, officially there for a consultation. Dr. Santos and Dr. Williams are standing by with their legal teams. The others are ready to go public the moment the story breaks. Elena checked another notification on her tablet, and Maya just confirmed the sealed records have been successfully submitted to the medical board. Astria turned from the window, her designer suit armor for the battle ahead. On her desk, a framed photo showed Atlas at his mini microscope, his face alight with the pure joy of discovery. The sight strengthened her resolve. "Time to go," she said, gathering her materials. "Is everything ready in the boardroom?" Elena's smile was sharp as a scalpel. "Everything, including some surprises Dominic won't see coming." The walk through the hospital corridors felt surreal. Staff members nodded respectfully. The Blackwood Institute's reputation had grown formidable under her leadership. None of them knew they were about to witness the systematic dismantling of one of medicine's most prestigious families. Outside the boardroom, Dr. Rachel Chen waited, her posture tense but determined. Like the others, she had suffered years of career sabotage after Dominic's abandonment. Unlike them, she would have the satisfaction of watching his face when everything unraveled. "Ready?" Astria asked quietly. Rachel nodded, clutching a folder containing proof of how the Thorne family had blocked her research funding. My son asked me this morning why he's never met his father. After today, I'll finally have an answer that doesn't make me feel ashamed." They entered the boardroom together, taking their seats just as Dominic strode in, his presence commanding as ever. He faltered slightly upon seeing Astria, but quickly recovered, his surgeon's mask of confidence firmly in place. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," he began, standing at the podium. "Today I'm presenting a proposal for the expansion of our neurosurgery department. With my uncle retiring as chief of surgery, it's time to look to the future." "Before we proceed with Dr. Thorne's presentation," Astria interrupted smoothly, "the ethics committee has some findings to present." Dominic's expression flickered, the first crack in his perfect facade. He hadn't expected her here, hadn't realized how deeply she had embedded herself in the hospital's power structure during his years of careful avoidance. "Dr. Blackwood." Carlton Thorne's voice came from the head of the table. "This meeting was scheduled specifically for the neurosurgery department's proposal." "Indeed it was," Astria agreed, her voice carrying the authority that had made her one of medicine's rising stars. "And what could be more relevant to that proposal than an extensive review of the department's practices?" She nodded to Elena, who distributed thick folders to each board member. Dominic's face remained composed, but his hands, those surgeons' hands that performed such precise procedures, tightened almost imperceptibly on the podium. "What you're looking at," Astria continued, standing to address the board, "is evidence of systematic manipulation of patient outcomes, selective case assignment, and deliberate suppression of unfavorable results, all centered around one family's pursuit of surgical perfection." The room erupted in murmurs as board members began flipping through the documents. Carlton Thorne's face had gone pale, his eyes darting between the papers and his nephew. "These are baseless accusations," Dominic declared, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. "Clearly, Dr. Blackwood's personal feelings are entirely irrelevant," Astria cut in smoothly. "Every document in those folders has been independently verified. But let's focus on specific cases, shall we?" She pressed a button, and the room's screens lit up with patient records. Case Study 1, Maria Rodriguez, age 42, presented with an operable brain tumor, officially referred to another hospital due to scheduling conflicts. In reality, the case was redirected because the success probability was deemed too low to risk Dr. Thorne's perfect record. More cases appeared on the screen, each telling the same story. Difficult procedures quietly redirected, unfavorable outcomes buried, statistics carefully massaged to maintain the illusion of surgical perfection. "This is an outrage," Carlton Thorne blustered, but Astria wasn't finished. "The manipulation extends beyond patient care," she continued, bringing up new documents. "The Thorne Family Medical Consulting Group, a network of shell companies used to channel patients, control outcomes and—" She paused for effect. "Manage other potential complications." Rachel Chen stood then, her voice steady as she described how her promising research had been systematically undermined after Dominic's abandonment. As she spoke, screens displayed the paper trail of blocked grants and sabotaged opportunities. Dominic's composure cracked further as he recognized her. His eyes darted to the door, but security guards, quietly positioned by Elena, stood ready. "Dr. Chen isn't alone," Astria announced, pressing another button. The screens filled with faces, the other women, their children, all bearing the unmistakable Thorne family features. 7 women, 7 brilliant medical professionals, 7 careers systematically undermined after encounters with Dr. Dominic Thorne. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Board members whispered furiously among themselves, papers rustling as they discovered more damning evidence with each page turn. "This isn't just about personal betrayal," Astria continued, her voice cutting through the noise. It's about the systematic abuse of power, about a family dynasty that has corrupted the very principles of medical ethics they claim to uphold. She nodded to Elena, who pressed a button on her tablet. Across the city, news sites began publishing their carefully prepared exposés. Phones around the boardroom buzzed as notifications poured in. Breaking news: prestigious medical family accused of systematic fraud. Investigation reveals years of manipulated surgery outcomes. Medical dynasty's dark secret: a pattern of professional and personal betrayal. Dominic's phone lit up with messages, but his hands were shaking too badly to check them. Carlton Thorne had slumped in his chair, the weight of his family's crumbling legacy visible in his posture. Astria announced, "The medical board has already received copies of all evidence. As has the district attorney's office. The sealed malpractice cases have been reopened, and the women you tried to silence?" She smiled coldly. "They're holding a press conference in 1 hour. "You can't do this," Dominic finally managed, his voice barely a whisper. "I already have," Astria replied. "But don't worry, I learned from the best. Every move has been precisely calculated, every outcome carefully controlled, just like you taught me." The board chairman cleared his throat. "Dr. Thorne, in light of these allegations, you are suspended from all surgical duties pending a full investigation. Security will escort you to clear out your office." As Dominic was led from the room, his perfect world crumbling around him, Astria remained standing, every inch the powerful figure she had become. The first strike had landed perfectly, but this was just the beginning. Outside the boardroom windows, camera crews were already gathering on the hospital lawn. Within hours, the Thorne family's carefully constructed reputation would be in tatters, but unlike their victims, they wouldn't have the chance to rebuild. Elena approached with another update. "The other women are ready for the press conference, and Atlas's school just called. He won first place in the science fair." Astria smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her professional mask for a moment. Her son's triumph on this particular morning felt like poetry, the next generation of the Thorne medical legacy already proving itself, but under a different name, and with a very different set of values. The first strike had been delivered with surgical precision, but the operation was far from over. As she gathered her materials to leave the boardroom, Astria caught her reflection in the window, no longer the betrayed wife, but a force of nature who had turned scientific precision into the perfect weapon. Let Dominic and his family scramble to save their reputation. The evidence was irrefutable, the timing perfect, the execution flawless. The dynasty that had caused so much pain was about to learn a fundamental lesson in karma. Sometimes the most devastating procedures were performed not with a scalpel, but with the truth. Chapter 11. The Fall. The press conference room at the Blackwood Institute hummed with anticipation. Every major news outlet had sent reporters, their cameras trained on the podium where 7 women stood united. Behind them, a massive screen displayed headline after headline, each one another nail in the Thorne family's coffin. Medical board launches, full investigation into Thorne family practices, systematic fraud uncovered at prestigious hospital, pattern of professional and personal betrayal, rocks medical community. Astria watched from the wings as Dr. Rachel Chen took the podium first, her voice steady as she detailed years of professional sabotage. The camera flashes illuminated her face, showing not a victim, but a survivor ready to reclaim her narrative. After Dr. Thorne abandoned me and our unborn child, Rachel stated, her words cutting through the room. My research funding mysteriously disappeared. Grant applications were denied. Publications were blocked. Today, we know why. She gestured to the screen, where documents showed the clear paper trail of the Thorne family's interference. Each piece of evidence had been meticulously prepared, every connection documented with scientific precision. Elena appeared at Astria's side, tablet in hand. "Dominic's lawyer just called. They're requesting a private meeting." "No," Astria replied, her voice cold. "Everything happens in the light now. No more private arrangements, no more quiet settlements." On stage, Dr. Maria Santos had taken the podium, describing how her groundbreaking surgical technique had been credited to a Thorne family associate. As she spoke, more evidence appeared on the screen. Emails, meeting minutes, altered documentation. Astria's phone buzzed with a message from Maya, the private investigator. "Carlton Thorne just resigned from the hospital board. Emergency meeting of the Thorne Family Medical Foundation scheduled for this afternoon." Perfect. The dynasty was starting to crumble from within. A commotion at the back of the room drew everyone's attention. Dominic had appeared, his usual immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. His tie was slightly askew, his hair disheveled, small details that spoke volumes about his mental state. Security moved to intercept him, but Astria held up her hand. "Let him stay," she commanded. "He should hear this." Dr. Sarah Williams was speaking now, her voice carrying years of suppressed anger. "My son asks about his father. Thanks to the Thorne family's reputation management, I couldn't even prove Dominic's paternity without risking my medical license. They buried the DNA test results, threatened legal action, used their influence to silence me." Dominic's face contorted as photo after photo appeared on the screen, his abandoned children, all bearing his unmistakable features. 7 boys, ranging from Atlas's age to 12, each showing the same brilliant potential he had once been so proud of in himself. "But the truth couldn't stay buried forever," Sarah continued, pulling out official documents. "The DNA tests have been unsealed, the pattern of abandonment documented, and the systematic destruction of women's careers has been exposed." Elena leaned close to Astria again. "The medical board just announced an emergency session. They're suspending all Thorne family members' medical licenses pending investigation." Astria nodded, satisfaction coursing through her veins. The carefully constructed house of cards was falling exactly as she had planned. Dr. Jennifer Martinez took the podium next, her prestigious oncology credentials adding weight to her words. The manipulation went beyond personal betrayal. Patient outcomes were selectively reported. Difficult cases were redirected to other hospitals. The Thorne family's perfect surgical record was built on carefully curated lies. The screen behind her filled with statistical analyses showing the impossible perfection of Dominic's surgical outcomes. Graphs and charts demonstrated how cases had been selected and results manipulated to maintain the illusion of infallibility. Dominic started forward, his face a mask of desperate anger, but froze as Astria finally stepped onto the stage. The room fell silent, reporters leaning forward in anticipation. This was the confrontation they had been waiting for. "Dr. Thorne," she addressed him directly, her voice carrying all the authority she had built over 3 years of careful planning. "Would you like to explain to these reporters why you sent divorce papers to a maternity ward, or shall we discuss the pattern of behavior that preceded that moment?" He opened his mouth to speak, but she continued relentlessly. "Perhaps we should examine the Thorne family's generational history of abandonment, your uncle's secret families, your father's hidden children, your own string of discarded relationships." The screen behind her filled with a complex web of connections. The Thorne family tree annotated with previously hidden branches, each representing another destroyed life. "Or maybe," she continued, her voice taking on a razor's edge, "we should discuss the medical ethics violations, the manipulated patient records, the strategic use of consulting firms to hide unfavorable outcomes." From the back of the room came new commotion. Carlton Thorne had arrived, his face ashen as he took in the scene. But before he could speak, another group entered, representatives from the district attorney's office, warrant in hand. "Mr. Thorne," the lead investigator announced. "We have some questions about certain financial transactions related to your medical consulting firms." The room erupted in fresh chaos as cameras swiveled to capture Carlton's expression. Decades of careful manipulation were unraveling in real time, broadcast live across every major news network. Astria maintained her position at the podium, her presence commanding as she delivered the final blow. The Blackwood Institute is establishing a fund for all children affected by the Thorne family's actions, educational support, career guidance, and most importantly, a community that values truth over appearance, ethics over reputation. She gestured to the other women who stood united behind her. "We are not victims seeking revenge. We are accomplished professionals demanding accountability. The truth about the Thorne medical dynasty isn't just about personal betrayal. It's about the systematic abuse of power that has corrupted the very foundations of medical ethics." Elena appeared beside her, handing her a fresh document. Astria smiled as she read it, then held it up for the cameras. "The hospital board has just voted to rename the Thorne Neurosurgery Wing. As of today, it will be the Ethics in Medicine Center, dedicated to maintaining the highest standards of both professional and personal integrity." Dominic's face crumpled as the last pillar of his family's legacy was stripped away. The name that had opened every door, smoothed every path, would now be synonymous with scandal. "You've destroyed everything," he managed to say, his voice barely carrying across the silent room. "No, Dominic," Astria replied, her tone clinical and precise. "You did that yourself, with every woman you abandoned, every career you sabotaged, every patient record you manipulated. I simply provided the evidence." As if on cue, her phone lit up with a photo from Atlas's school, her son proudly displaying his science fair project, his brilliant mind already showing promise of surpassing both his parents. In his smile, she saw the future of medicine, brilliance tempered by compassion, excellence achieved through honest effort rather than manipulation. The district attorney's team was leading Carlton away now, his legal troubles mounting as more evidence of financial impropriety came to light. Dominic stood alone in the back of the room, watching his carefully constructed world crumble to dust. Astria turned back to the reporters, her voice strong and clear. The Thorne medical dynasty was built on a foundation of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. Today, we're not just exposing those lies, we're ensuring they can never be rebuilt. As the press conference concluded, the 7 women stood together for photographs, their united front a powerful symbol of resilience and redemption. Behind them, the screen displayed one final headline: "Medical community embraces new era of transparency and ethics." The fall of the Thorne dynasty was complete, but from its ashes, something new and better was already rising. Astria had not just destroyed a corrupt system, she had replaced it with one built on truth, accountability, and the genuine pursuit of medical excellence. Looking out over the sea of cameras, she felt no triumph, only a sense of justice finally served. The brilliant surgeon who had once abandoned her in her most vulnerable moment now stood alone, stripped of everything he had valued: reputation, position, power. But unlike him, she had built something lasting, a legacy of truth, a community of survivors turned champions, and a future where her son and his half-brothers could pursue their inherited gifts without the taint of their father's ethical failures. The fall was complete, but the story wasn't over. It never would be, as long as there were systems to be reformed, truths to be uncovered, and justice to be served. Chapter 12. Victory in Truth. 1 year after the fall of the Thorne medical dynasty, the grand ballroom of the Blackwood Institute shimmered with celebration lights. It was Atlas's 4th birthday, but the gathering represented something far more significant than a simple children's party. Crystal chandeliers cast their glow over the assembled guests, not just Boston's medical elite, but a new kind of medical dynasty in the making. 7 boys with steel-grey eyes darted between elegantly dressed adults, their laughter echoing through the space. Atlas, the youngest, led his half-brothers in what appeared to be an impromptu science demonstration, their inherited brilliance shining through in every gesture and word. Astria stood at the center of it all, watching her vision come to life. The past year had transformed the medical landscape completely. The Thorne family's disgrace had opened the door for genuine reform, with the Blackwood Institute leading the charge in both medical innovation and ethical oversight. "The latest results from the cancer trials are extraordinary," Elena reported, appearing at her side with a tablet. "The treatment protocol you developed while pregnant with Atlas is showing a 94% success rate. The FDA is fast-tracking approval." But Astria's attention was fixed on a more personal triumph. On a massive screen behind the children's science demonstration table, headlines told the story of the year's achievements. Blackwood Institute revolutionizes cancer treatment. Former Thorne victims unite to reform medical education. Ethics in Medicine Center sets new standards for professional conduct. Medical Board adopts Blackwood protocols for surgical outcome reporting. Dr. Rachel Chen approached, her 8-year-old son Alexander in tow. "He's already talking about medical school," she said proudly, "but this time the legacy will be different." Indeed, the scene before them represented a complete reimagining of medical dynasty. The 7 boys, Atlas, Alexander, James, Michael, Christopher, Daniel, and David, had inherited their father's brilliant mind and their grandfather's surgical gifts. But under their mother's guidance, these talents would serve a different purpose. Elena reported, pulling up more documents. "The Foundation's educational program is fully funded. Trust funds established for all 7 children, with emphasis on ethical medical practice and research integrity. The Blackwood Children's Scientific Foundation, established from the proceeds of Astria's medical breakthroughs and the successful class action suit against the Thorne family, would ensure these boys had every opportunity their father had tried to deny them." A commotion near the window drew their attention. Atlas had set up an impromptu laboratory demonstration, his small hands moving with surprising precision as he explained basic chemistry to his fascinated brothers. The sight brought tears to more than one mother's eyes. Their children, once meant to be hidden away as family shame, now shone as beacons of hope for medicine's future. "Have you seen the latest?" Dr. Maria Santos asked, joining their group with a newspaper. The headline was bold: "Former neurosurgeon Dominic Thorne denied medical license reinstatement." Astria took the paper, scanning the details she already knew. After the exposé, Dominic had lost everything: his medical license, his reputation, his family connections. Carlton Thorne was serving time for financial fraud. The family's consulting firms had been dissolved, and their carefully built empire had crumbled to dust. But that wasn't what made Astria smile. Her victory wasn't in their destruction. It was in what she had built from the ashes of their betrayal. The Blackwood Institute had become the world's leading center for both medical research and ethical oversight. Her cancer treatment protocols were saving lives across the globe. The women, once silenced by the Thorne family's influence, now held positions of power throughout the medical community. Most importantly, the children they had tried to deny were thriving. Each boy showed the brilliant potential of the Thorne genetic legacy, but guided by values their father had never understood: compassion, integrity, and the genuine desire to heal rather than simply succeed. A small hand tugged at her dress. Atlas looked up at her with those familiar steel-grey eyes, now bright with excitement. "Mommy, come see! We made a discovery!" She followed him to the children's science table, where all 7 boys had collaborated on what appeared to be a complex molecular model. Their explanation, though childish in its enthusiasm, showed stunning intuition for their ages. "They're extraordinary," Elena whispered. "All of them. The next generation of medical pioneers, but with hearts to match their minds." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the ballroom, Astria caught a glimpse of movement across the street. Dominic stood in the shadows, watching the celebration he would never be part of. His once immaculate appearance was shabby now, his proud bearing broken by the weight of his exposed lies. But Astria felt no triumph in his fall. Instead, she gathered the children, all 7 boys with their father's eyes and their mother's strength, for a group photo. This would be their legacy. Not the corrupt power of the Thorn dynasty, but the genuine brilliance of children raised to value truth over appearance, compassion over achievement. "Atlas," she called softly, "why don't you show everyone your birthday wish?" Her son beamed, running to the podium that had been set up for announcements. At 4, he already commanded attention like a born leader, but with a warmth his father had never possessed. "When I grow up," Atlas declared, his young voice carrying clearly through the ballroom, "I want to be a doctor like Mommy. Not just to do surgery, but to help people and find cures and tell the truth." The other boys nodded enthusiastically, each adding their own dreams of healing, of discovery, of making the world better through genuine achievement rather than manipulation. Astria moved to stand behind them, the other mothers joining her to form a protective circle around their children. This was her real victory, not the destruction of the Thorn dynasty, but the creation of something far more powerful, a legacy built on love, truth, and the genuine desire to heal. Outside, Dominic turned away from the scene, disappearing into the gathering dusk. He had lost not just his reputation and career, but the chance to be part of something truly extraordinary. These boys would carry his genes, his talents, his potential, but they would use those gifts for healing rather than self-aggrandizement. The celebration continued into the evening, the ballroom filled with laughter, discovery, and the unbridled joy of children exploring their potential. The 7 boys moved seamlessly between scientific demonstrations and birthday games, their brilliant minds already showing the promise of a new kind of medical excellence. Astria watched it all, her heart full. Her revenge hadn't just been about destroying Dominic's carefully constructed world, it had been about building something better from the ruins. The Blackwood Institute would stand as a testament to what could be achieved when brilliant minds were guided by ethical hearts. As Atlas blew out his birthday candles, surrounded by the brothers he had never known he had, Astria saw the future of medicine in their shining faces. The Thorn legacy of brilliance would continue, but transformed by truth, strengthened by unity, and dedicated to genuine healing. This was her masterpiece, not just the destruction of a corrupt dynasty, but the birth of a new one, founded on the principles that truly mattered. In the end, her revenge hadn't just been about justice, it had been about redemption, about taking something broken and creating something beautiful. The 7 boys gathered around Atlas's birthday cake, their grey eyes bright with joy and promise, were living proof that sometimes the greatest victories came not from destroying your enemies, but from transforming their legacy into something worthy of the gifts they had squandered. Subscribe if you liked.